Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to today's Planning Committee meeting. My name is Councillor David Connor, and I am Chairman of the Planning Committee here at Fenland. Welcome also to those members of the press and public who are joining us via the live stream. Before we begin, please can I take this opportunity to remind everyone to turn their mobiles and computers to silent and ensure that when using the microphones, the red light is on and then turned off when you have finished speaking. Now we go to agenda item number 1, and we'd like to ask member services if we've got any apologies for absence. So over to you, Joe. Thank you.
Thank you, Chairman. No apologies received today. Thank you.
Thank you. Agenda item number 2 is to confirm and sign the minutes from the meeting of March the 6th, 2024. Do I have a proposer to approve the minutes? Thank you. So I'm looking for a proposer. Councillor Middleton. Anybody else that second it? Councillor French. All those in favour, could we just have a show of hands? That's unanimous. Thank you very much. So those minutes have been approved. 3, we'll go to urgent items. There are none. 4 is declarations of interest. Member services will now go to each councillor in turn, and please can you state if you've anything to declare in relation to any of the agenda items. So over to you again, Joe. Thank you.
Thank you, Chairman. Councillor Benny.
Nothing to declare this month, Joe.
Councillor Connor.
Also nothing, Joe. Thank you.
Councillor Gershner.
For one item, item number 8, I know the applicant. I've employed his business services on a paid basis once in the last 12 months. I do not and have not socialised with the applicant in the last 10 years. Thank you.
Councillor Gershner, can you just confirm whether you'll be taking part in that item, please?
Yes, I will be taking part in the item.
Thank you. Councillor Marks.
Thanks, Joe. On item 7, I'm a member of the Internal Drainage Board. Apart from that, nothing else to declare.
Councillor Mrs French.
Nothing.
Councillor Mafferdon.
Nothing to declare.
Councillor Hicks.
No, nothing.
Thank you, Joe. That seems everybody. Thank you, members. We'll now go to the main part of the meeting. Members should only make a proposal on a planning application when invited. However, I'll initially be asking anybody if they're going to propose an officer recommendation. Clearly, if no such proposal is forthcoming or the proposal fails, I will be then looking for an alternative proposal. Members are reminded that any such proposal should be accompanied by the planning reasons for doing so. So without further ado, I'll now hand over to Gavin Taylor. He's the Principal Development Officer here at Fenland to present application F/YR23/0550, agenda item number 5. So Gavin, when you're ready, thank you.
Thank you, Chair. Good afternoon, members. So item 5 is the proposal for one dwelling. It's an outline application with all matters reserved at land north of Longways, Back Road, Murrow. So just looking at the site layout, the site location, sorry. So it's located towards the sort of northwestern edge of Murrow. As you can see there, the red line, which extends quite a long way northwards, is actually to demonstrate the sort of extent of visibility sprays that can be achieved there. But as you can sort of see where its relationship set behind Longways, the properties to the front and frontage development along Back Road there. So this is the indicative site plan, the one on the picture on the right, as you can see it. As you can see, the access proposed is via Murrow Bank to the north of the property, which also achieves a field access into that field, which I understand belongs to the applicant. That field is under the ownership of. And you can see there the access is directly from Murrow Bank down into sort of that field, and then turning south down towards the property itself via a driveway. Just for sort of information, the dashed red line you can see there is land within control of the IDB. So this application was previously refused, albeit for a different kind of access arrangement. As you can see, this is the refused scheme, which proposed an access arrangement to the south, off the corner of Back Road, leading onto Murrow Bank. That was refused, as set out in the officer report, on the basis of character harm, being backland development, not in accordance with the linear type development you can see along Back Road. Also flood risk, given that it's in flood zone 3, and inadequate sequential test assessment, and also concerns over access arrangements given its position on the bend of Back Road there. But nonetheless, the main site location of the dwelling is as now is currently proposed. So just looking quickly at the photographs, you can see the photograph to the top left is sort of on the corner of Back Road there. You can see the dwelling long ways in the foreground, with the land rising up to the highway at Murrow Bank. Again, to the photo 2 to the right, top right, is sort of another shot of that. Photo 3 is along Murrow Bank, heading eastwards. Across the site, you can see the polytunnels there in the field, and then bottom right is sort of views northwards along Murrow Bank, heading north. So essentially, in summary, the application is outline for one dwelling, with all matters reserved. Essentially, the application for a similar development in terms of its location was previously refused. The difference between this latest one is essentially a proposed access arrangement being different from Murrow Bank rather than the corner of Back Road as previously. It's considered, however, as before, that the development in backland position in this particular location would be out of character with the area, an incongruous form of development. In addition, the dwelling would be sited in flood zone 3, and it's considered that there is an adequate assessment of the sequential test for flood risk, and therefore it fails on those grounds, because it's considered ultimately that there are other sites reasonably available at a lower risk to flooding that would accommodate that development. It's therefore considered to be contrary to policies LP 12, 14 and 16 of the local plan and the general aims of national policy. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Gavin. We have one speaker on this application. I'd now like to invite Peter Humphreys, of course he's the agent, to make his presentation to the committee. You've obviously got 5 minutes, Mr. Humphrey. Thank you.
Could I just ask the planning officer to put the location plan up? That's it, thank you. So Murrow is classed as a small village in LP3 with development of a limited nature. Clearly you don't get much more limited than a single plot. Whilst this application is a resubmission of a previous refusal, I believe the application addresses all previous reasons for refusal. The application will now have a new access, as Gavin has already explained, from the bank. So the property faces the bank, and Cambs County Council confirmed on the 4th of the 3rd, as per your report, they now have no objections. So that is one of the reasons of refusal gone. The application also rounds off development. If you look at the site plan, you can see that the bulk of the red area, and we're only looking at the plot, the rest is access or ancillary. It rounds off development, and the extent of development matches with that the other side of the bank as shown on the location plan. And it uses the drain as a natural stop line or boundary as described in policies LP 12 and 16, where it specifically states that they should be used for stop lines and retained. So that's what we believe this infills and uses the drain as a stop. We undertook direct discussions with the North Level Drainage Board during the course of the application, and in fact the drain is cut through land as owned by the family as owned by the family, and the Drainage Board wanted to create this new drain, and so they let them cut it where they wanted it. So I just want you to realise that the landowners are happy working with the Drainage Board. The drain is currently maintained with access from Back Road, and again, if we can get onto the location plan, Gavin, you'll see, if you follow the drain along that runs to the back of back road, it then kicks in towards back road, and that's it's almost a little plot where the drainage board get access to the drain. The site is currently used for domestic garden or polythene tunnels, hence the site is not open countryside or agricultural. We believe this application will create a better view as you enter the village from Parson Drove, rather than the polythene tunnels or the rear elevation of Longways. Environment Agency has no objection, as provided the flood risk assessment measures are adhered to. Interestingly, Mr. Chairman, at the time of the application, 22nd of June 2003, this application passed the sequential test. So 8 months ago, this was acceptable. Unfortunately, the application has taken 8 months, and now apparently, and we don't know why, we haven't been told why from the planning officer, it doesn't pass because there's another plot available. Just park that one. We feel that's quite disappointing, and we are not in control as agents. We don't know when applications come in and when they're going to be approved. So we're penalised for something that we put in that complied at the time of the application. I would also respectfully remind members of an application made by Fenland District Council, Joe, it's FYR22 1187 at Parson Drove, Riverside Gardens, for an application for a single plot, flood zone 3. So that was edge of village, that was flood zone 3, was approved within 7 weeks. Even had 2 plots approved in the village that they deemed irrelevant, provided they used a renewable energy source to make the application acceptable, which is what we have actually included in our application as well. In conclusion, I would suggest that this plot is a logical plot on the edge of the village,
You have 30 seconds.
within the developed form of the village, using the existing drain as a natural boundary. Will also enhance the view of the village as entered from Parson Drove. The sequential test was deemed acceptable and would therefore request that members support this application. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Mr. Humphreys. Members, questions, clarifications to Mr. Humphrey. If you know what to do, raise your hand. Councillor Mifferton, please.
Hi, Mr. Humphreys. Just one question about access. It says that one of the it was previously refused, and the difference now is because of the proposed second access. The second access from this map we can see here. When I visited the site yesterday and I had a walk around, on the Morrow Bank, you're going to have another access from Morrow Bank, right? At what point is that going to be at? Is it where the speed limit drops from 60 to 40?
Within the 40 mile an hour.
How close to, because there's not a very big gap there, how close to this 60 mile an hour mark will the access be?
I don't know the exact distance. It's certainly within the 40 limit, which is that they've recently dropped the speed limit there anyway. I don't know the distance. I couldn't tell you whether there's any photographs of the road along the bank there. I don't know if Gavin's got any. Along the bank, shown where the speed limit is.
It's just off, on the second photo, it's just off past where this tall grasses. You can't see it from there. Yeah, on the second photo, it's just past where the tall bit of grass is. You can't see it from there. It's when I looked at it, and when I look at the map you produced to us, I couldn't tell if the proposed new access was inside the 60 mile an hour zone or outside.
It's within the 40. It's certainly within the 40 mile an hour zone. The new access is.
Right. Okay. Thank you.
Thank you.
Councillor Benny, thank you.
Good afternoon, Peter. You said this passed the sequential test. I mean, was this fairly early on when you submitted the application? Because, you know, to allow an application to go ahead and then refuse it on something that it's already passed, to me, seems unfair on the applicant and unfair on yourself, and creates work for the planning department as well.
Yeah, it's item 1014 of the planning officer's report. The submitted flood risk assessment sets out within the sequential test the approved planning applications in Merrow as the date of the flood risk assessment being complete, states whether development has either been completed or is under construction. This has been compared to FDC's records. The detail submitted is unfortunately now out of date, and applications have been granted since the submission. So the planning officers have identified that as now a reason for refusal. Now, if I was a cynic, I would say they've waited until such time as applications have gone in. So, we don't have to prove Mr. Humphrey's application because we've got another plot as it fails the sequential test. But of course, that wouldn't be the case because I know they're more professional, in fairness. That was a bit tongue-in-cheek, Mr. Chairman, wasn't it? I do apologise. I didn't want to offend anyone.
That was, to be truthful, that was a bit too near the knuckle for me. So,
I apologise.
yeah, and we mustn't cast assertions on
No,
planning
not at
committees,
all.
on the planning officers at all, must we? Thank you. More questions to Mr. Humphreys before we let him go? No, thank you very much. So, members, time for questions for officers, please, if you have any. Councillor French, then Councillor Benny.
As a matter of interest, when was this application submitted and validated?
Gavin, I'm sure will be able to answer that. When you're ready.
Through you, Chair, so the application was valid as of the 22nd of June last year.
Okay. Would you like to come back on that, Councillor French?
No.
Okay. Councillor Benny, then. The floor is yours.
Thank you very much. Question for Gavin. I mean, when a sequential test is undertaken and it passes, how long does that last for?
So essentially, the point at which the application is determined is when you would assess whether there is other sites reasonably available to achieve the development at a low area of flood risk. So that's essentially it. So if information comes forward during the course of determining the application, then you have to give that weight.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you for that, Gavin. Anybody else for officers at all? Oh, Councillor Gerstner, thank you.
On the why the change. Now, never mind the time scale about it's in flood zone 3, we accept that. It passed the sequential test, and due to the time limit, it now doesn't comply with the sequential test. Am I correct?
I mean, in terms of as for passing the sequential test, I've not got any record that we concluded that it did at the time. All I've got is obviously the officer report, which sets out that there is information that's come to light post-submission that indicates it doesn't pass the sequential test because there are other sites reasonably available in lower areas of flood risk that have been approved.
Did you want to come on back on that, Councillor Gerstner? Sorry?
The question's been answered. Thank you.
Super, thank you. Any more questions to officers at all? Councillor Hicks?
I'm just going to pose a purely hypothetical question. It may be my naivety here, but to Gavin. Just say, for instance, that you had planning permission passed with the sequential test, and you've got X amount of years to build it. But before you decide that, you wanted to tweak the plans and put a garage on, say, and you go back for a different application, and there was another site come on. Would it be refused because now there's another one in the sequential test chain, because you've theoretically still got planning permission on the old application?
In a more preferential site.
Yeah,
Okay.
but if you want to tweak it, even though you've still got planning permission, you want to tweak your plans and resubmit a plan, you can't have it now because during that time there's another application, come in.
That's an interesting thought of that. Yeah, Gavin, please.
Yeah, so essentially if there's a live extent planning permission on a site and a subsequent application comes in on the same site for a slightly different development, we would give significant weight to the fact that there is still an extent permission live, and therefore the development could be capable of implementation on the original application. So that would be given significant weight. So in terms of the sequential test, whilst, yes, we would say, it's not been delivered. However, if it's still extant and being capable of delivering, then that would be a significant material consideration to weigh in favour of, approving a further development on that site of the same.
Thank you. Any more questions to officers? No burning desire to say. Thank you very much. Thank you, Gavin. Members, I'd now like you to invite members to debate the item in respect of the material planning considerations relevant to the application. If you'd like to speak, please raise your hand. So we're in debate, ladies and gentlemen. Who wants to kick it off? Do I see some nods of heads and no hands raised, or what? Councillor Benny, thank you.
Well, since nobody else wants to.
Absolutely.
Here we are again, and I'll always go back to White Road in Eastry, where we had an officer's recommendation to refuse those 2 lovely bungalows that are now 4 lovely bungalows, and don't they set that village off when you come in through from Benwick. Just because something hasn't been that way doesn't mean it can't be that way. And polytunnels don't really excite you when you drive into a village. In terms of character of the area, it's very, a very personal taste as to whether you like it or whether you don't. I personally think a house on there would enhance the entrance to the village. The only bit that concerns me is the sequential test, but hearing that it passed when the application came in, and now is part of the refusal, it's a lot of time by the applicant, a lot of money by the applicant, time by the agent, and time by the planning department to continue with an application that it's already passed, and then to refuse it. I think that's maybe unfair, but life is unfair, and these things happen from time to time. But in terms of principle of development, would a house look nice on there? It is one. There is a natural boundary with the dike that is there. If this was for 5 along there, I think I may view this in a different manner, but it is a single plot, and truthfully, I see very little wrong with this. Concerned about the sequential test, but equally, if it passed in June, that should not be a block to development. Yeah.
Relevant answers or relevant questions, whichever way you like to take them, members. Anybody else want to add to this debate? Councillor Miffordin, and then you want, yeah, okay, then Councillor Marks. Thank you.
Yeah, just back to the access that I was talking to Mr. Humphries about earlier. When on the first photo, there's a little green. It's called a dirt track, but it wasn't. There was no dirt on it. It was just grass verge when I went there, just past the this first house here, number 1. You drive down there. It's not a very good access road to go down. It's tricky. I mean, it doesn't do it justice in the picture. It's quite steep. The incline is quite steep as you come in. So having another access from the other side, I think it's a good idea. And also, I found out that where the polytunnels are, the people who rent the land for where they put the polytunnels on, they put a gate so that people can access the dike, because there were trespassers with caravans and stuff. So I personally think it might be a good idea to have that site developed so that you don't have the problem of trespassers. and any kind of unruly activity happening there, because the neighbors I spoke to, they did say that they had fear of that and they had to actually put a gate there themselves. So yeah, I don't know if that's a yeah, that's my view on that, really.
Okay, Councillor Marks.
Thank you. We seem to have, on number one, an awful lot of fails. And it basically comes down to local distinctiveness and character of the area. It's a Fenland village, and most Fenland villages are one road through, and building off them, there are plenty of other sites or other villages within the area that have much the same. Is it going to, it fails to reinforce local identity. What is the local identity of Murrow? What is the local identity of Fenland village? Basically, it's what houses are there, whether they're new or old. I personally don't see there's an issue with this. Street scene, contrary to policy LP 16, is it against the street scene? Again, all street scenes change. March has recently changed. March city town centre is now changing. So that's a street scene that's changing. And street scenes do change. Personally, for one property, I don't see an issue with this one.
Okay, I'll come in there then. Based on what Councillor Miffordin said, County Council Highway Authority have said on the 4th of March this year they have no objection to proposed development. However, it's unclear if the access track can be constructed without earthwork encroachment. Well, if they can't get it, they won't be building it, will they? So 5.6 is absolutely clear. So that, I mean, it states here also on 5.6, they don't object. So that's one. 5.6, prior to commencement, use of development hereby approved. Visibility display shall be provided on both sides of the new vehicular access, shall be made free of obstruction over a height of 600 mil within an area of 2.4 and 225 metres. Again, you know, that could be a condition that we put on that if members felt that was the right decision to go against officer recommendation to approve this. But, you know, it's one of them really. As Councillor Mark says, the villages are changing, the towns are changing, and thank goodness sometimes they do, because we can't stay 50 years ago, how much some people would like to. We've got to move on. But as we always say, we are where we are. So any more for this debate? No burning desire to. Okay, so I'm going to close the debate now, and I'm going to ask officers if they've got anything to say. I'm sure they have.
So I think just to clarify some of the sort of questions that came up, Councillor Miffordin, I've just done a quick measurement of where the 40-mile-an-hour sign is relative to the site access. It's around about 90 metres measuring off that. So obviously highways don't have an objection on that basis. In terms of the application, just to remind members, it is an outline application with all matters reserved. So matters of access, which I think Councillor Collins just raised, would be a matter yet to be agreed in any case. And I think also just in terms of sort of considerations over how it would appear as you enter the village, that there are no design details with this that are committed. So we don't know what that design is likely to be, or even scale at this time. Bear in mind it's in a high flood risk area. So it may be something that members might want to consider. Just in terms of sequential test, obviously, just in terms of assertion over the sequential test having been met, as I say, there's nothing on file to say that officers ever agreed that the sequential test had been met. That seems to be an assertion made by the applicant. So it's just to conclude that at present, officers are saying that the sequential test hasn't been met because there are other sites reasonably available at a lower area of flood risk. And then I think just in terms of sort of identity, I think the officer was referring more perhaps to the pattern of development, which, you know, you look along Back Road there, it's very linear ribbon type development, frontage dwellings, as it is as you go along Murrow Bank on the other side of the road there. There is no backland prevalent in that particular location. I think that's where the officer was coming from in terms of how it doesn't respect the current settlement pattern. And other than that, I've got no other further comments. Thanks.
Right, thank you. Councillor French, I will bring you in.
Thank you. Just to pick up what Gavin said, unless I misheard, surely at an outline application, the access has to be agreed, not at a later date. Or did I pick you up wrongly, Gavin?
His answer, Gavin.
But yeah, through you, Chair, so no, access doesn't have to be committed. The council can insist if they ask to do so within a month, but there needs to be an indication of where the access is likely to be derived from. The red outline, as you can see there, would restrict the location points where that access could be put through. Obviously, we've assessed the application based on the proposal to put the access where it is proposed on the site layout plan, which is deemed to be acceptable on that basis. One would assume, therefore, if it was going to be approved and then access details then committed, the applicant would be taking a huge risk to depart from that as an approach, because obviously that could create uncertainty in terms of safety, come back to the table in terms of highways issues. But nonetheless, access does not have to be committed at this time, just an indication of where it could be derived from.
If I may come back, that is totally different to what we have been told for years and years and years. I've been sitting on this authority for 25 years, and it's the first time this has ever come up. And I believe if this committee does decide to approve this application, the access has to be included.
Yeah, that's my belief, but we learn new things every day, don't we? So, did you want to? That's where you think access doesn't have to be committed.
No, essentially, the reserved matters would include details of access, which the council would then have the opportunity to consider and consult on.
But surely, but if that's the case, that's fine. That's fine. I'll accept that. And Councillor French and I are wrong, but and that's quite right because we often are. But if access was changed significantly, which it would be, would it have to come back to this committee? Because it may have a different highways may have a very different view of it, where they see there's no problem now with that access. Would it automatically come back to this committee?
Not as far as the scheme delegation is concerned, unless it's either called in or there are objections or the chair requests it to come to committee. If highways have an issue with that, then obviously as officers we would negotiate an improvement to that access arrangement to the point that we would be satisfied we could approve it. If we get to a point where we can't be satisfied and would then have no option but to refuse it on the technical ground, then it would come before the chair for consideration as to whether or not it needs to come to planning committee or not.
Yeah, thank you for clearing that up. So, Councillor Benny.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chairman. I also was under the impression that access had to be committed. If we think back, Mr. Salisbury's land at Chatteris on Black Mill Road, that was up for refusal on 3 grounds, and we refused it on the access because we were told the access had to be committed at that point. Am I not right, fellow members? I mean, when did that change? Because that was certainly my understanding. So if there's 2 of you wrong, there's now 3 of us that are wrong.
Yeah, and we've been round the track a bit with this planning, haven't we? And that Mr. Salisbury's application was, I suppose, 2 or 3 years ago, probably now, I see. But Gavin?
So obviously with an application, if access appears tricky, then the council can ask for detail. If that detail is not forthcoming, then the council can refuse on the basis that they've failed to demonstrate an adequate access can be achieved to accommodate the development. On this occasion, the indicative layout indicates that suitable access can be achieved, although it doesn't need to be committed.
That answers the question very nicely. Thank you very much, Gavin.
So, Councillor Mifflin.
Thanks, Chair. Just one question about the polytunnels. I don't know if I know we're supposed to consider applications on their own merit, individual applications, but on the map, there's a polytunnel. There are 2 polytunnels behind the first one, where the application site is. Now, I just want to know, and the only access to the other 2 polytunnels at the back is via this site. Will the people at the back, because they rent that separately, will they have access? Will they have a right of way through this? Is there any provision for that? Just a question.
Gavin, I wouldn't think so, but...
And that would be a private matter between the landowner and anyone who leases any land from them.
Absolutely, we can't. That's just illegal. That's just between them and the applicant and whoever. Planning can't get involved in any sort of maybe legal disputes. We've all finished then. So, oh, you could have, yeah, absolutely, Gavin.
So obviously, just based on the discussion, obviously, if this application is recommended for refusal, obviously, we would expect members to be providing material reasons as to why. But in terms of the flood risk issue, if the sequential test is deemed to have been met, then the next stage of that would be to demonstrate that the exception test can be passed as well, which is two-stage. One is to demonstrate that flood risk won't be increased either on the site or elsewhere, but also that there are wider community benefits to the scheme that outweigh that flood risk. So it's just a consideration that you may need to make if you choose to obviously recommend approval for this application. Thank you.
Thank you for clarification on that. So we'll press on. So do we have a proposer to go with officer recommendation to refuse this planning permission for this? So we know what we're voting for, to refuse this application. So I can't see any hands. So obviously that fails. So I'm looking for another proposal, please, or proposal. Who would like to make it? I'm looking to my left again, and Councillor Benny has picked up the challenge.
Somebody's got to pick the thing up, haven't they?
Most definitely.
In that case, then I'd like to go against officer's recommendation and approve the application. My reasons are: I do not feel this will harm the character. I think it will benefit the character. In fact, and when it comes to the sequential test, if it passed in June, I see the sequential test as no more than a block to development. As a planning committee, we're looking at land usage. If the land was suitable back in June, it should be suitable now. I do agree with what Gavin said about the exceptions test, and if he would like to sort the conditions out and work with that, I would be happy with that. But in principle, I think that, this, again, nice houses on the edge of a village, sets how you feel, how you view that village as a person passing through. We've done the same thing in Mainey, we've done the same thing in Coates, we've done this throughout the rest of the area, and I don't think that anything that I've seen that we have passed has been in any way detrimental when it's been built out.
I have to agree with that, Councillor Benny. Often we don't agree, but this one I have to say we do. So, yep.
Through you, Chair. Yeah, we're not going to be able to condition the exception test. As part of it, that is essentially a decision that needs to be made in the room.
That was just it. Gavin did mention it, and for that reason, I brought it up. I would be happy if that was the case, if Gavin wanted to. But if he's not, then we'll leave that part out of it as a condition. We'll leave it for you to set conditions. As we always say, not too onerous, please. But we'll leave that for officers to work that one out, if that's okay.
Yeah, I'm happy with that. I think basically I'm happy with that. Right. So to move on, we've got a proposal to go against officer recommendation to approve this application, proposed by Councillor Benny some 2 minutes ago. Have we got a seconder on that? Councillor Gerstner, thank you. So could I have a show of hands on that proposal, please?
That's a unanimous decision, Chairman.
So thank you, Joe. So that application has been approved. Thank you very much. So without further ado, I'll now hand over to Gavin Taylor once again to present application FYR 230753F, agenda item number 6. Thank you, Gavin, when you're ready. Thanks.
Thank you, Chair. Item 6 is the conversion of an existing barn to form a single dwelling, a 2-storey dwelling with 2 bedrooms at land north of 6 School Lane, Mainey. So just looking at the site location plan, so the development itself is located within sort of the core, the urban framework of Mainey. Comprises a barn set to the rear of dwellings that sort of sit along School Lane there. It's actually accessed via the host dwelling, which I believe is 8 School Lane, which sits to the, as you look at it there, sits to the west of the access road there. So, as you can see, it uses the existing point of access to lead towards that barn. You can see in grey there. There's parking for at least 2 cars within that site, with on-site turning to enable cars to exit in forward gear, a passing place as well along that way, as you can just see along the access road. There's garden land sort of to the north of the barn and sort of to that on that eastern fringe there. And it proposes to utilise the existing boundary treatments, which sort of comprise brick wall and fencing sort of around those boundaries of that site. So just looking at the elevations there, there's proposals to reinstall some of the first floor windows, but obscure glaze them, as you can see in that central upper picture there. On the ends, also there's proposal to block up an upper, what is sort of like a hayloft door, to block that up. And at ground floor there's also a proposal to increase the size of that window to meet with fire regulations in terms of egress. Some of the openings will be closed off with timber cladding, and there's a door being partly infilled as well, just to obviously facilitate the residential use. And the arched windows, as you can see on that bottom photo, a picture there, are also proposed to be reinstated, as is a roof light in the roof proposed to be inserted. So just in terms of the floor plans there, you can see that the dwelling itself is sort of spread over 2 floors, bedroom on both floors. There's a lounge area on both floors also, and bathrooms. But there's a kitchen area at ground floor and the main entrance lobby there, as you can see. This is a street scene photograph, sort of showing it relative to sort of site boundaries, as you can sort of see with the portal window there on the first floor. And these are obviously the photos of the site in general, so you can see the barn on photo 1. The access road is sort of shown on 2, 3 and 4, really from various different angles, which sort of show how that sort of leads down between that brick wall there to the barn. So just in summary, it's an application for a barn conversion to 2-bedroom, 2-storey property. It would include some external alterations in terms of fenestration, as well as sort of landscaping and layout areas to facilitate parking. The window positions have been sort of considered in terms of amenity impacts, and they're considered to be acceptable. So on balance, in general, it's considered to accord with the aims of the local plan and the recommendations to grant. Thank you.
Yep, thank you, Gavin. Once again, we have one speaker on this application. I'd like to invite Shana Jackson. Of course, she's the agent, to make her presentation. You've got 5 minutes also. Thank you.
Thank you. Good afternoon, everyone, and thank you for allowing me the opportunity to speak in support of this application. As you've just heard from officers, this is an application for a barn conversion within the built-up settlement of Mainey, where the principle of development is acceptable in accordance with policy LP3. We've worked very closely with officers to achieve the scheme which is before you with a positive recommendation. We've respected the character of the existing barn by keeping all external alterations to a minimum, and therefore the visual impact of the works will be negligible. The ground floor windows will be obscured by existing and proposed boundary treatments, and the proposed first floor windows, where they directly face neighbouring properties, will also be obscure glazed. As identified in the officer report, there will be no harmful overlooking or loss of privacy as a result of the development. The proposal provides a generous garden, ample parking and turning, and no objections have been received from statutory consultees, including the parish council. The scheme is acceptable in policy terms as set out in the committee report, and we respectfully request that planning permission is granted. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms Jackson. Questions, clarifications to Ms Jackson? Councillor Marks.
Thank you. We heard the words reinstate. Now, double glazing doors don't look to me to be reinstate. Is this basically taking the shed doors off and then putting on those? I'm sorry, I'm a bit lost, as it almost sounded like it had been a house previously.
It hasn't been a house previously. There were existing openings there, and what we're doing is, well, the word reinstating, so we're putting those openings back in with those details shown on the drawing. So I think in some cases, so on the front elevation, there's like a little bit of boarding work being put in to facilitate the window and the door next to it. Does that make sense? Ish, yeah.
You're happy with that? Okay, Councillor Gerstner, thank you.
So I don't know what the distance is off the top of my head, but they would be able to wheel the bins down that private drive and down to the public footpath, and so they could be collected from the back edge of the highway. I think we talked about this before, where we've had an appeal decision which says that you know, if the bins need to be wheeled more than 30 metres, that's not something that would be supported by the inspectorate. So I'm comfortable that it would provide adequate amenity in accordance with sort of case law and the appeal decisions we've received. But there is space, as you can see, on site for the bins to be stored. It just be wheeled to the public highway for collection.
Carry on, Councillor Gerstner.
My concern is not necessarily on this development, on other developments, where the bins are taken out 2 days early and collected 2 days late. They're left on the pathway. This causes quite a lot of problems for pedestrians and people with sight impairments and prams and pushchairs and mobility scooters. So that's why the question's being asked. Okay, thank you.
I think. So you carry on.
No, I was going to say, no, I understand, but the difficulty that we have, all of us here, is that you obviously can't control how people behave, and it is unfortunate that that happens. And all we can do is make sure there's space in sight for bins to be stored, which, you know, there is.
I'll just come in there before see Councillor Hicks. If it was the committee's, if it was a problem for the committee, would the would he enter into a private agreement where a small lorry could back down there and take the bins from there, because it's wide enough to get a little lorry down there, isn't it? So it's a private collection, other than if Councillor Gerstner's worried about leaving the bins there. Could a private arrangement be had?
I mean, if it was a deal breaker, I'm sure that's something we could agree to. But I would just question whether that would be reasonable to do that, given that it is acceptable in policy terms for curbside collection.
Yeah, it's a problem, as you heard from Councillor Gerstner, isn't it? So I'm just bringing that up really as another way forward, really. Councillor Hicks and then Councillor Marks.
This is the beauty of having site visits, because you can actually go and have a look and see how far that barn is from the road. And I have to form this in a question. I mean, I don't consider that a long way. My mum and dad walk their bins further than that to the top of the road every day. I mean, do you consider that a long way? Because I don't.
I mean, I personally don't, and I'm sure you know better than I do. There are so many cases in Fenland where people are wheeling bins further than that to be collected. So I don't see that it's any different to any of those other scenarios.
Councillor Marks again, bring you in, thank you.
Thank you. This is actually my ward. I know the road, School Lane, pretty well. It is quite narrow, the footpath along there. And you are right, people do leave bins out. Is there any way we could incorporate in the actual entrance, so there's enough room on the entrance instead of, I don't think a private collection by any means is a good idea. Vehicles reversing up and down and stuff like that. It's just another hassle and another accident waiting to happen. Whereas somewhere just off the road at the gate or at the entrance where we could have a bit of a bin place.
Yeah, I mean, we have control over the land to the west, so we could put a little pocket in there for bin storage, if that's something that you would like.
We've got some sort of consensus then, haven't we? Okay, thank you for that. Councillor Benny, thank you.
Thank you. When I looked at this, has this building ever had any connection with agriculture? It's described as a barn conversion, but looking at the houses around, some of the houses down School Lane are actually quite old, and I know we end up with farmyards in the middle of town, but a barn conversion, it looks more like a brick shed to me than it does a barn. Has this ever had any connection with agriculture?
I don't know is the answer. I mean, it's a historic building. It's reasonably attractive. It's got some old features on it. Maybe it was. I mean, it certainly has that kind of barn language. Yeah, I'm not sure.
Yeah, that was a question I was going to do to officers. When is a barn a barn? Okay, I think you've answered that as probably as good as you can. Anybody else want to, any questions? No. Thank you very much. So questions to officers, and please can you ask me, try and answer me, when is a barn a barn?
It's when you say it is, Councillor.
Sorry?
It's when you say it is a barn. That's all I can really say. I don't think there's
Definition.
not a definition in planning terms as to what constitutes
Barn's
a
a
barn.
barn. So, okay, that's fine. Food for thought then. Any more questions to officers at all? Well, any questions to officers? No? Okay, thank you very much.
No, Chair.
Oh,
Sorry,
I thought you were.
I was just agreeing.
Oh, you were agreeing. Oh, thank you. Councillor Hicks will then, thanks.
Yeah, I think the officers have got this one right. I mean, it's a building what definitely needs to be put back in the realm of doing something with it. Actually, it looks more like a house with the windows bricked up than it does a barn, to be fair, when you have a look at it. There's really good access to it. It seems when we went, there was no traffic around coming out on that road, so not an issue there. I mean, I have a different opinion of the bins, because I think that you could easily walk that. I very often put my mum and dad's bins out and walk further than that to the top where they live. So I think tick, tick, tick for me. I think it's all right. I think it's fine.
Yeah, thank you for those positive comments. Councillor Hicks, anybody else want to? Councillor Marks?
Thank you. Heard what Councillor Hicks says. Yeah, on day-to-day bin movement, brought down the drive. Yeah, I can't see an issue with that as long as they're off the road when they get to the end of the road. So if they're not taken overnight, can't see an issue. Know School Lane pretty well. You're probably pretty lucky that it wasn't very busy. Certainly at school time and stuff, there's traffic going up and down there, and certainly there's pedestrians as well. Read regarding the objections. I have to say I'm happier with this one than the two properties that were turned down previously, which makes sense. We're bringing an old building back into what it is. I do find it a bit bizarre. What is a barn? What isn't a barn? However, in saying that, we've got another one in just up the road, which is an ATCOS building with asbestos, and that's being called a barn conversion as well. So I can't really sort of like determine in my own, to me, a barn is a wooden shack that, is then converted. But however, we live and learn. My only concern about this is in the centre of the village at the present time, we do have some fairly major flooding issues. That is my big concern. Apart from that, no, I would fully support this application. I just hope that the flood conditions will be sort of like got over.
Yes, thank you, Councillor Marks. Anybody else at all? Councillor Benny, thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Chairman. I'm not going to go against this. It's an officer's recommendation to approve, but I look at this. That access is terrible. We would sit here if officers came forward with a recommendation to refuse, and we've seen applications that have had refusal because of poor access, worse than this, or better than this. So worse than this. I don't think the access. I'll get my way around. I think the access is poor, and it's going to take away from the house or bungalow that's next door to it. I'm not going to vote against it today because it's got a recommendation to refuse, but this when you look at this is worse than that previous application where it did terrible harm to Murrow, and it was going to ruin the entrance to the village, and it was going to cause a change of character that is not acceptable. And then you get this, which is a brick building. I don't consider that to be much of a barn. It's a brick building, and because we call a shed a barn, it then makes it acceptable. And the access here I don't consider is good. But equally, if it meets policy, I'm happy to pass it. But this is one man's meat, another man's poison. And we get it the other way around, like on the previous application, where officers say it would do harm to the character of the area. I know this is tucked around the back, but is cramming buildings and dwellings where you're going to have people coming in and out of an access, does that not do more harm than passing the previous one in Murray? This is, I know every case is individual. I just look at this and I think this has got, when you just look at it, this has got a lot less going for it than the previous application that had a recommendation to refuse on it. And this is the hypocrisy in a way. of how planning looks. I don't see this as a good application. I will support it this afternoon because it meets policy.
But this is where the pop comes in, where you shake it all about and
It
pull
is.
in the good bits
I
and
won't
take
be
out the
against
bad bits and see what outweighs what. And, you know, I know exactly where you're coming from, but it does meet policy. So walls
I would like to know how many bales of straw have been in that barn. I'll bet there haven't been many.
but you don't have to call it a barn, you can call it what you like. Anyway, enough of that. Councillor Hicks.
You see, I've got a slightly different opinion than Councillor Benny because I'd rather reuse a building than put another building on a piece of land and take that away from wildlife and things like that. So you're better to reuse what you've already got, I think.
Well, that's why it's subjective, and that's why we've got a planning committee, isn't it? Councillor Miffordin, then Councillor Marks.
Yeah, when we visit the site, it is a beautiful historic building. It is already there. It is not going to take new footprints, so I don't see how it's going to affect anything, flooding or traffic-wise. There's an existing asset, there's a host property, and it's just beyond a metal gate where the host property is. Yes, the access is a bit narrow, and I'm a bit concerned, like on bin days, for example, when everybody brings their bins out, how it's going to affect, if they line it on the pavement, how it's going to, pavement users like wheelchair users or whatever, they may have to go on the road. But then it's already happening at the property, and I think it's, I'm happy to support this one because I think it's bringing a beautiful old building back into use. It is built, it's solid, it doesn't look like an abandoned barn. I think I overheard someone saying that someone had bought a shop and has stored the contents of sold his shop and stored the contents of his shop in there, from what I know. So even though it's not lived in, but it is being used, and I think bringing it back into proper use will be good for the building, for the area. There is no new footprint; it's already there. Thank you.
That's a good point. Councillor Marks, I'm going to bring you in. Probably that should be nearly the last.
Thank you. I think one other thing, they haven't got greedy. It's a 2-bedroom property. You know, one bedroom. So at the end of the day, the likelihood is we'll probably only have 2 vehicle movements up there. I do agree with Councillor Benny. It's not the greatest road in the world, and it's certainly not the greatest access. However, had that been a 5-bedroom house with the 5 vehicles or whatever travelling up and down there, I'd be a lot more concerned. And I think we have actually now got the bin issue sorted, as long as we can get it to the gate and then by the gate, so it's off the highway, off the pavement. I will support this.
I've got to steer where this is going. Do you want another bite, or are you all right? No, let's Councillor Gerson, okay?
Should that be the case, can we not condition that the applicant would mitigate that by putting back boxes within the near vicinity? They also claim that there'll be a lot of trees. Can we not again condition that for trees being taken out that they're replaced? Thank you.
Yeah, I'm sure that's a thing that the officers can answer, but we're still in debate and we'll bring officers in. But I think we've all had a good say on this one. I'm going to close the debate now. Gavin, you've got something to say on the bins?
Yes, if I could, thank you, Chair. So just on in terms of bins, obviously, Cambridgeshire County Council as the Waste and Minerals Authority haven't adopted what they call a recap guidance, which is essentially a guidance document as to how dwellings should be arranged relative to bin collections and how that sort of arrangement should be made. The guidance suggests that people should not have to carry their bin more than about 30 metres to a collection point, and that refuse collection officers shouldn't have to travel more than 25 metres to wheel that bin also to the point of disposal. Having had a quick measure on the site plan, it looks about 38 to 40 metres from the building to the pavement. So on that basis, officers wouldn't obviously recommend a refusal on that basis, because we've exceeded recap guidance by sort of about eight metres or so. I take the point about sort of collection and concerns about collection. I think, as the agent has sort of mentioned, we can't really dictate how people operate in their own environs and how much of a nuisance they may cause to blocking pavements, etc. But to obstruct a pavement is actually a breach of the Highway Act. And if you block a pavement, park a car on it, for example, then the police can issue penalties for that. It's nice. We hope to think that residents would obviously observe that and make sure that they do wheel their bins in as swiftly as possible after collection. That said, if members would feel more comfortable that a bin collection strategy is secured with this scheme, that's been done before on schemes that are considered to be problematic. If you feel that that meets the test of planning conditions, so it's reasonable, necessary, proportionate, related, then obviously we could secure a condition to that effect. Personally, as an officer, I would say it's probably not necessary given the scale of the development, which is only going to serve 2 bedrooms max, and therefore it's not going to be a significant amount of bins being left out on that footpath. Notwithstanding that, I think just in terms of Councillor Gerstner's comments regarding bats, birds, etc., condition 3 requires a bat survey to be undertaken if development hasn't sort of commenced by July this year, is what the condition suggests at this time, condition 3. Further to that, condition 5 requires essentially a scheme of bird and bat boxes, which is recommended in the Protected Species Survey report to be sort of submitted. So there seems to be some evidence with this scheme to indicate that we've got a fairly good idea of what we can do in terms of securing biodiversity enhancement and mitigation measures. So hopefully those conditions would satisfy you, Councillor, on that one. I think just in terms of comments about sort of appearance, etc., obviously this application proposes the conversion of an existing building that already sits within the street scene, within the urban environment. The last scheme that we looked at was a brand new dwelling, which obviously doesn't exist already. So the two are quite distinctly different in terms of how we're assessing this. And obviously there is national policy really tries to endorse the effective reuse of existing buildings, reuse that embodied carbon that's in it, and obviously to not extend into the countryside. And that's kind of the assessment that's taken on this in terms of an effective reuse of an existing building. Okay, thank you.
Yeah, thank you. So, but I think, just to sum it up, I think Miss Jackson did say there could be some mitigating situation that she could put the bins, which seems a bone of contention, off the highway. So I think we'll probably have to go with the officers, with Chana's offer on that one, really, to be fair. I don't think we can do any more. So So do we have a proposer to go with officer recommendation to grant planning permission? Councillor French, seconded by Councillor Hicks. All those in favour of that?
That's a unanimous decision.
Okay, that application's been approved. Thank you. Right, so I'll now hand over to Gavin again to present application FYR 23/0891F, agenda item number 7. So busy day for you, Gavin. Off you go when you're ready.
Thank you, Chair. So agenda item 7 is for a change of use of an existing field to paddock land, including the erection of a stable block, formation of a new access and hard standing, which will also involve culverting of an existing drain there as well at Christchurch. I'll just refer members to the update circulated yesterday, which were further representations from a local resident, so they should be with you with officer comments on that as well. In addition to that, this morning we received a further letter of representation from a resident which raised concerns in respect of sort of drainage, particularly sewerage, with known issues of sewerage for residential schemes within the area and issues that result from that, and also concerns about potential impacts on bats and sort of a lack of assessment on that. Just to sort of respond to that representation in respect of drainage, obviously this is not a housing scheme, this is a proposal for a sort of quite modest stable, and obviously the use of the land for paddock land, and therefore not significant amounts of built form. So therefore it's not considered that, that sewerage impacts is relevant to this particular proposal. In respect of bats, the application is supported by an ecology survey which is set out in 9.18 to 9.23 of the officer report. That ecology survey is considered to be proportionate to the nature and scale of the development. It focused more on impact of the drains because of the culverting and potential impact to water voles, etc. Having regard to the actual site, it's considered that there are limited features for bats within the current site, and therefore the impact of developing it with essentially what would be a grass paddock and a modest stable would not consider to have any significant impacts on those kind of protected species. Nonetheless, as with any application, all developers have a legal duty under the Wildlife and Countryside Act to ensure that protected species are not harmed if they come across them at any point. So just looking at the application, so it sits within, on the edge of Christchurch, as you can see there. Immediately sort of south is the development known as the Croft, and to the east, on the eastern boundary there, is Brimstone Close. And the access point is via Fen View, which I'll come on to in a second. And you can see sort of countryside extending northwards and sort of west-southwest from the site there. So this is the site plan, as you can see, with access via Fen View to the sort of south there. Again, just noting that culvert that's required over the open drain that currently exists. So the access is proposed to be a sort of metalled surface of 5 metres leading into the site, where it then converts into a compacted stone surface. And as I say, that drain is proposed to be culverted to accommodate the access. Stable block is proposed along that northern boundary there. Adjacent to that are some outbuildings, existing outbuildings, so they're not dwellings. The stable block itself is around 27 metres from that eastern boundary, from number 10 Brimstone Close. That's actually been moved away from the boundary during this application, following sort of discussion. There's a trailer proposed sitting at the edge of the stables, which you can maybe just make out there on the southwest corner of the stable, which is proposed for their sort of for muck to be piled upon and then periodically removed. And existing fences are proposed to be retained along that northern and eastern boundary. The plan indicates that the boundaries adjacent to the drain, so you can see on the southwest and the south of the site, they're proposed to be left open, I guess, so the drains are accessible. So these are the stable details there, quite a modest stable, sort of two bay, as you can see from the floor plan. So a sort of single sort of stable area with a hay and tack store and canopy over, quite a sort of standard arrangement. And we've got some photos, obviously, the access from Fen View, photograph 1. So there would be a proposal to sort of come through there. And then deeper into the site, photograph 2. Photograph 3 is the eastern boundary with Brimstone Close, and you can see the existing fence arrangement there and the dwelling adjacent. And then photo 4 is views sort of into the site there. So this is a full application, so the details you've seen are fully committed, which proposes sort of change of use to a paddock land with a single stable block. It's not considered to introduce any significant impacts in terms of character of the surrounding area. Stables are quite commonplace in the countryside. It's not considered also to have any detrimental impacts to amenity or any drainage concerns. We have had a number of objections received as set out in the officer report, but there are no technical issues that officers feel need to be resolved. They seem to have all been resolved. And obviously the IDB would be responsible for sort of final details of that culvert. They have a specification that they expect people developing sites to sort of abide by to ensure the free flow of water through that culvert. So therefore the scheme is considered to be compliant with the development plan, and the recommendation is to grant. Thank you.
Yep, thanks Gavin. Once again, we have no speakers on this application, so I'd now like to invite members to questions to officers. Anything? Councillor Marks?
Thank you. It's just a play on words, really. I'm looking here and I read occupying or occupation. Now, to me, because you occupy a house, Are we clear this isn't going to be used for living at any point in time? Because that seems the concern of sort of some of the residents, that this is a lead on. So are we saying it's agricultural and it's going to remain that and not have any occupation of any description? Because are they going to come back on a technicality?
Through you, Chair. So the application is for a stable and paddock land. There's no application for residential use. We have to assess that on the basis on which it's being applied for. We can't make assumptions. There's nothing to indicate there that there's a move to put a dwelling on the site. If an application came in for such, or if it occurred unlawfully, then obviously we would get involved, and we would then assess that on its merits at that time. But on the face of it, this application is for the stable as described, the paddock as described, and that's the assessment on which this would be made.
Yeah, Gavin's absolutely right. He summed it up to a nutshell. It's in front of us for a stable block, and that's what we've got to judge this application on. If it comes back for 4 or 5 hours at a later date, they'll have to go through the same process again, and the planning committee, whoever that may be, will have to determine that rightfully as it's set out before them. But today, stables. Thank you. But it's a good point, Charlie, for you being a sceptic. Anyone else at all for questions for officers? No, let's debate the item then. Who's going to kick this off? Councillor Mifflin, welcome. Thank you.
Yes, thanks, Chair. When we visited the site and had a look around, I personally, I didn't discuss it, but what, you know, as you do, people come up and talk to you when you're on site. And so some of the neighbors did come and talk, and they were concerned about traffic movement and other concerns that the neighbors raised. I don't think this is going to have that much of an impact traffic movement, because it's going to be a stable block. You don't get the talking about HGVs. There are no I mean, okay, yes, you bring maybe a horse box, no matter how large it is. Most of them are like, I think the largest horse box I've seen for a single horse is probably about a 7.5 ton horse box. So I don't see where they've said they are concerned about the HGV. I remember one particular young mother who said her child plays on the street. Well, your child should not be playing on the street, unsupervised at least. Yeah, exactly. That's the way I look at it. You should not have your children playing on the streets unsupervised. So I personally don't see anything wrong with it. It's gonna make use of land that's currently not being used. When I visited the site, it was overgrown. Even the ditch was overgrown. It wasn't properly looked after. There was branches and bramble and trees in the ditch. So in the dike, I should say. So I think this is a good application, in my opinion. Thank you.
Good points. Anybody else? Oh, Councillor French.
Thank you, Chairman. Just to say, I'm welcome and pleased to see middle level have actually responded this time. I understand they do have a new person who is going to be dealing with planning applications. So with a bit of luck, we might get more input.
Yep, absolutely correct. They certainly have. Anybody else at all? Councillor Hicks.
Yeah, I'd just like to, I know the residents have got concerns, and I'm sort of reiterating what other people have said here today, but about it being converted at a later date for housing and this, that and the other. But I don't honestly believe that this particular building could be converted. It's a one room for hay and one room for a horse. So who would want to live in a sort of building like that anyway? Plus the fact that if they actually wanted houses on there, wouldn't they put an application in to put houses on there in the first place, not to put up a stable and then pull it down and move on later? So I don't think that holds any weight. I mean, I'll be supporting this today because I think it uses a field what is basically just scrubland at the moment. It's going to do something with it, and I believe that also there won't be the amount of traffic what the residents think. If it is being used as a stable block, you're probably going to get somebody feeding a horse in the morning, one down there in the afternoon, probably one riding a horse during the day. That's all you're going to get down there. So that's my view on it.
Relevant points made, I think. Councillor Benny.
Yeah, thank you, Chairman. It's a lot of money and a lot of work for a horse to look after it, isn't it? I mean, putting that culvert in there is going to cost a lot of money for a horse. I mean, scepticism seems to be the word today. I would be sceptical that this will not come back with some other kind of application on it. But seeing as the application that is before us today is for a stable, you aren't going to get hundreds of traffic movements for a horse, are you? So looking at what we've got in front of us today is for a stable block, and until we get anything else come in, if we ever do, that's what we're looking at. So as a stable, yeah, I can't see anything wrong with it. And if someone wants to spend tens of thousands of pounds putting a culvert in, then that is up to them. Maybe their horse is worth it. Sugar would be, but anyway, there is nothing. I can't see anything wrong with this. It's you know, the residents. I've looked at the residents' objections, and truthfully, we're not putting an incinerator there. Dare I mention that word? You know, we are not putting an incinerator there, and if we're getting these number of complaints for a horse, that could be a lot worse. Officers have got it right. This needs approving.
Probably a very valuable horse, you know. Probably they've found Shergar or something after about 30 years. But anyway, enough of this. I think I've got to steer where this is going. I think we can close the debate now. Gavin, would you like to sum up, or have you got anything else to say? Right, so I'm looking for a proposal here to go on, Councillor French.
Go with the officer's recommendations.
I've got a second on this, Councillor Imifident, sorry, my teeth nearly fall out there. So we've got a proposal, go with officer recommendation to approve this. Can we have a show of hands on that?
It's a unanimous decision.
That has, yes, that has been approved then. Thank you very much. We'll go on quickly, hand over to Gavin to present application FYR 23/1015F, agenda item number 8. So Gavin, thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. So this agenda item 8 is a proposal to erect a timber shed to the front of an existing dwelling, which includes demolition of the existing shed. I understand that's already occurred, so this application is part retrospective in that respect. Application at 57 High Causeway, Whittlesea. So just looking at the site, so the site is located right within that historic urban core of Whittlesea. Within the conservation area, as you can see on the plan, the pink area indicates conservation area, and the brown areas indicate sort of listed buildings around it. So this is sort of the site plan, which shows the number 57, the host dwelling, location of the shed on its southeast corner, as you see it from that plan there, and obviously indicates sort of distances from site boundaries, etc. This is the elevational detail of that shed, as you see it there, so flat roof, essentially. And this is it as a proposed sort of street scene. You can see the brick wall that runs across the front of that dwelling, steps down slightly. And these are the site photographs showing the actual shed in position. It's tarpaulin over at the moment, not complete, obviously. And you can see that sort of relative to the sort of site boundaries. Conservation officers raised sort of concerns about the accuracy of the street scene plans relative to the actual site boundaries in terms of its height currently. As you can see, it's sort of street scene shows it quite small, whereas that's slightly higher. Essentially, the application is a fresh application for erection of a timber shed. As you can see, it's partly built at the moment to the front of the dwelling. The existing shed has already been removed. So therefore, this application is afresh in that regard. It's considered that the sort of the size, the scale, the form of that development does not positively contribute to the character of the area, particularly the conservation area, given its historic importance, and also it's considered to harm the setting of listed building opposite in terms of general arrangement. And therefore, on that basis, it's considered to be contrary to heritage policies of the NPPF and the local plan. The refusal reasons set out in the officer report doesn't make reference to the Whittlesea Neighbourhood Plan, which includes two policies, as you can see on the screen there, Policy 7, B&C, and Policy 8, which is about appropriate design and preserving heritage. So it's proposed that the refusal reason, if supported, also includes relevance to the Whittlesea Neighbourhood Plan as set out on the screen there. The recommendation is to refuse. Thank you.
Yep, thank you, Gavin. We have one set of speakers on this application. I'd now like to invite Richard Jones, he's the applicant, and Matthew Taylor, he's the agent, to make your presentation to the committee. You have 5 minutes between you. Thank you.
Good afternoon all, thank you very much for letting us speak today. Firstly, with the photographs, they are not taken in context, that is not entirely the shed at all. That is the material for the shed that's been covered up to protect it. I believe the framework was started a few months ago when realised it needed to get planning permission. That's technically all the framework for the roof and walls and everything like that. It's just covered up for protection and the slab base. We did highlight that to the officer a couple of times and the conservation team. Originally it did have a pitched roof on it, but the officer agreed that maybe that would be a bit too much imposing on the street scene. So we revised it to a flat roof. As well, one of the main things we've highlighted is parking down there is terrible. Emergency vehicles can't get down there. There's a bowls club opposite, a public house as well, which is very busy. And with this, the applicant wants to store one of his classic cars in the shed, which will then give him more space to take one car off the road and keep it on his own private driveway, which will hopefully alleviate issues down the street. Like we said, it's a flat roof. It's only just the design is to just literally sit above that parapet wall. So from the street scene, if you were to stand on the other side of the road, all you're going to see is the top capping of a fiberglass roof. It would be like lead grey colour, kind of fitting with the area. Maybe you might see a little bit of the fascia or a gutter, but the rest of it hidden behind a wall. The last 30 years, there's been sheds, greenhouses, and all sorts there. But that's kind of like fell on deaf ears as such because they should have had permission in the first place, but they was built that long ago. And there's, again, like I say, sheds get dilapidated, need replacing, and that's what this is. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Good afternoon. Thank you for letting us come today. We moved into the property in 2002. Point out that there's been, as Matt just said, there's been buildings and structures to the front of the property for 25, 30 years. This included 2 greenhouses and various sized garden sheds. I have got sort of picture evidence to prove that. We decided to erect the shed to house my classic car and classic motorcycle, thus removing the old structures. We have been replacing structures and sheds and with more substantial structures over the last 16 years. Over this period, we have never had any complaints or objections from any neighbours or passing public. Consequently, I can't see how this application to build a better garage-style structure will have a detrimental effect on the conservation area or the buildings opposite, which we've had no complaints from the occupants there. We took the decision last year to replace the timber shed with a more substantial, better-looking garage-style structure, which you've seen the pictures of. Also moving it a bit further down to the southern end of the garden so it doesn't impede the frontage of the house. And that's it really. So as you see at the moment, it doesn't look nice with tarpaulins over it, but as Matt said, it's just to protect the floor that we've already got and the timber that we've got there already. But thank you very much.
Yep, thank you very much. Members, questions to Mr. Jones or Matthew Taylor? Councillor Mifferton first, and then Councillor Gerstner.
Thank you, Chair. Very quick question, gentlemen.
And then Councillor Hicks, sorry.
What's the footprint of the existing shed that was there? How does it compare to the current shed you're putting there now?
It's only very slightly bigger in the design and access statement, heritage impact assessment. There was pictures from the listed building opposite upstairs looking down onto that shed. It is literally just wider, not that just trying to fit a car in it instead of anything else. So it's only fractionally bigger.
sorry, can you, in measurement terms, how is it, a meter, half a meter, and also
I don't
what about
have
the
any
height of it?
drawings on me. Those all submitted as part of the application with some information on it that Richard might know more.
Yeah, the shed that was there was, it actually impeded into the front of the house, the shed that we erected back in about 2015, I think, with a pitched roof on it, and that was, it was slightly bigger than what this is actually, because it was longer, okay. The width was a bit narrower, but it was longer. So that basically, we gone for a
Okay,
probably a slightly smaller footprint in length. Thank you.
Councillor Gerstner, thank you.
Thank you. Can we go back to the another plan where it showed the block? Yes, that one will do. Thank you. Is it not possible to move the shed back a couple? Looking at this picture, move it back a couple of feet. That's the first one. Yes. Okay. That's the first one. That's one question. The second question is, you're unequivocally saying to us that the plan there is the correct measurements, dimensions, and what we're seeing at the moment is purely for storage, okay? The third question is, I know from experience of the area, for many years there was a big van there using your business, you see? So I can't see the difference between having a big van there and having a shed there, okay? To me, the shed is a better way of using that land. My request would be, if it was possible to move the shed back a little bit, try and keep in keeping with the local area when you put the roof on it, and I can't see a problem with it. No.
Okay, Councillor Hicks.
Yeah, when I went there and had a look, I wasn't under the impression that that was going to be basically the same sort of thing what you was going to have. When you built, I know I've got a rough idea in my mind because I've visited the site how high the wall is. How high is the building you're proposing to put behind it? Because what is it, about a 6 foot wall, something like that? What's in front of it? I'm just trying to picture exactly how high that wall is and how much higher your building you're going to suggest is going to be higher than that wall.
I measured it this morning actually. So standing against the wall, it is about 2 meters high, the wall, or just under. But I think it's 1900 because I can just sort of see. And on the drawing, which Matt has put, it's 2.2 meters. So it will be probably sticking above the wall. But we can, yeah, okay, thank you.
Okay, pertinent questions. Anybody else got any at all? Councillor Benny, thank you.
Good afternoon. Looking at the back, obviously it's a bit of an L-shaped house. You've got what looks, is that a conservatory at the back, or is that an extension that you put on the back?
That is a conservatory that we built back in about 2004, I think, something.
So, I mean, really, you've got a side garden there, haven't you? Because you've got no depth of plot. So I'd take that you do most of your entertaining and use your garden for your personal use. If the shed was moved back, that would encroach into your personal space and therefore affect your family life in terms of how you live your life in that house. Would that be a fair assumption of how it is?
Yes, that is. Also, being brand new grandparents, we've got a granddaughter, so she would like to come and run around the garden. So yeah, we couldn't really move it into that space, no. Thank you.
Yeah. Councillor Miffordin, thanks.
Sorry, I don't know if this is a question, but I'm sure you can answer me. You know, the suggestion that you probably move the shed backwards or more toward in line with the existing property. Will that not affect the opening and closing of the shed doors?
Yeah, because the doors are facing the driveway. So as you come in, like where the Y is on that plan, that's where the driveway comes in. You turn, then you'll drive straight into it. If as well, I think the ground raises up quite a bit into the garden, so therefore the building will then look taller if you raised it up, moved it over there. And if you put the doors on the other side, you won't be able to back out and use it.
Will it be possible to have like an up and over type garage or what the
It
design
would end up
is?
going taller then, because then we'll have to put a different lintel in
Yeah,
to
okay.
take
Got it.
the door. So they're just normal stable doors at the minute that open out and keep it as low as possible.
Okay. Any more questions at all? No, thank you very much. Members, questions to officers? Councillor Marks and Councillor French, thank you.
Thank you, Chair. Gavin, the gentleman said it's a vintage car. So what if he went, and I've had a quick look on Google now, if he had a caravan there, which stands 3 metres, obviously it's a mobile structure, but there's no reason he couldn't have a caravan in there for 12 months, you know, as a touring caravan and park that there at any point in time, which would actually stand taller and be white and not blend in at all. There would be no planning issue for that, would there?
Through you, Chair, no, there wouldn't. No, obviously a caravan's mobile, and we're looking at lifetime developments, so you know, there's no guarantee that the current occupier would occupy that property forever and a day. Obviously, caravans come and go, whereas structures are permanent. That's the difference here.
Okay, thank you.
Councillor French.
Thank you. This is a wooden shed. Is there no permitted development rights on this site? I mean, it hasn't got a lot of amenity. The wooden shed that was there before has been demolished. Surely it's just a replacement slightly larger than what was already there. And I really don't understand why, if they've got permitted development rights, unless they've been taken away, why we've even got this planning application in front of us.
Is that a question to?
It is.
Yeah.
Yes.
So there are no permitted development rights to erect structures forward of the principal elevation of the dwelling, which that is. So PD rights don't exist for this structure. Planning permission didn't exist for the previous structure either.
Okay, any more questions? Oh, sorry, Councillor Marks.
Sorry, just going back to that previous question, referencing being caravan. So you're saying that it's basically, obviously the gentleman could move on and leave the shed. Could we not condition this where, if he moved, the shed would have to be taken down?
Through you, Chair, you'd have to be convinced that there are reasonable grounds to put a personal permission on. So there would have to be, you'd have to give significant weight to the personal circumstances of the individual as to why you would be granting a shed in this location rather than anywhere else, for example. So I think we had this in the last committee about personalised permissions, and you know the NPPF pushes back quite hard on those. We're looking at a permanent structure for the use associated with that dwelling. But how that's used, we can't control. So even if you were going to put on a personalised permission for the individual because of, you know, essentially how they're operating today, they could cease using that tomorrow for classic cars and just use it for household storage. We wouldn't be able to reasonably control that. We're looking at a structure in association with the residential use of that dwelling.
However, if he came to sell, it could be part of a condition that he would then have to take the building down. So whether he uses it as a garage or a shed, because we've sat here two applications ago and we've said, is it a shed, is it a barn? You know, again, there's confusion again. But with this, if we're saying it's a structure that can be taken down, we can condition it has to be taken down at the end of, you know, if the gentleman moves. Is that is still a possibility?
You know, if members felt that that's a reasonable condition to impose and place a burden on someone to demolish a structure if they move out of that property or cease using the structure, for example, then I guess you could impose such a condition. I don't think officers would recommend you do. I think we just look at, as I say, unless you're happy that the personal circumstances that have been put forward today warrant the structure in this location.
So the gentleman having a vintage car and wanting to keep it on his own premises and also take another vehicle off the road, surely that's to a benefit.
If you feel it is.
Thank you.
I think for me, the gentleman's had a shed there before. He's lived there since 2002 or somewhere like that. He's got a vintage car, and I think it's absolutely imperative. If you've got a vintage car, you want it on your property. You want to start it up. you want to take it for a drive. If you go 10 miles and you put it in another shed somewhere, it takes the enjoyment of it. I've got a steam engine, and I know I'd rather go and start it up in my garage, which I don't do, rather than go 10 miles, because it takes all the enjoyment away driving that 10 miles. So I think where we are is, if we're going to allow this shed, or whatever you want to call it, for me, we need to do it in its entirety. We need to trust the guy that circumstances can change, of course, but he's going to keep his vintage car in there. And my feelings are, we don't want to condition anything, really. That's for me. But I think sometimes we need to put trust in people, especially when they live there 22 years. But anybody got any more questions for Councillor Hicks?
And just a question to officers, because I don't know the answer to this, probably naively. If we was to pass this today, I mean, a wooden shed is not an indefinite length time building. It will rot. It will be there probably 7, 8, 10 years, and then it will need another one putting up. If we grant plan permission on this one, does the applicant, in say 10 years' time, need to put in another application for another wooden shed on this when it's rotted? And or is it rights that you can always have a shed there once that one rots and replace it with like for like?
Okay, that's either Troy or Gavin can answer that.
As long as it's replaced like for like, then it is lawful to replace the building with whatever replacement structure you need.
Yeah, I mean, we are where we are, aren't we? Councillor Gerstner.
Thank you, committee. It's not a concern, my only observation is that the structure is built to the plan, exactly to the plan, to the millimetre of the plan, and I would support it. And if they can put a top to it that's in sympathetic to the surrounding area, whatever that may be, then that would be a great help. Thank you. We're still questions to officers. Have we got any answer to that, Councillor Gerstner's concerns?
If I may, Chair. Councillor Gerstner, are you suggesting that a pitched roof would be more suitable, or that the form of roof is what would
A pitched roof would be out of character in the area, because it would go way above the line of the building, but something that could possibly be colour matched to the brick wall or something like that. But all sorts of fiberglass roofs on buildings these days are colour coordinated with the surrounding area. So that may work, it may not work, and a lot of it goes down to cost as well, which I'm quite if we can keep it sympathetic to the area, I think it would be okay.
Okay. Well, we could also say quickly, the applicant agent would work with officers, if indeed it got passed, to work with officers to come to a satisfactory conclusion. And then obviously, I think that's acceptable, isn't it? So, right, no more questions to officers at all. Oh, you want one? Okay, Councillor.
Sorry, one last question.
No worries.
One last question about the proximity of this site to a listed building. Just want to ask officers, what is the rule? How close does it? Because in the executive summary, it mentions about in a conservation area, and also the fact that it's near a grade 2 listed building, which I did see when I visited the site. But I just want to say, how close does the development have to be? Even though it's not a new development, there was a shed there before, it's just been put back up, for it not to be a relevant consideration.
Yeah, through you, Chair. So there are no sort of hard and fast rules about how close or how far away things need to be from listed buildings. It's generally about the listed building, its setting relative to existing built form in the area and how it responds to that. There's a bit more of a breakdown from our conservation officer at 5.14 of the officer report, which might sort of inform me a bit more about sort of his consideration as to what those impacts are and how he's considered them. But as I say, in terms of your question, there is no explicit sort of set distances.
I think we've nearly done this to death, really. I'm good. Nobody's got any more questions for officers, surely. So I'm going to close that. So thank you. Now I'm going to invite members to debate the item in respect of material planning considerations relevant to the application. Councillor Benny.
Thank you, Chairman. I think you're right. We spent far too long on this already. I mean, this is a shed. The man wants it, and he wants it where he wants it. I mean, I had a house that most of the garden was at the side, and I also had a big shed in my garden. It's immaterial of what he wants to use the shed for. It's about land usage. To put that at the back would impede on his social and home entertainment. You don't want a shed outside your back door. You want it as far away from your door, and that's where this shed is. It's behind a brick wall. Like Councillor French said, this shed, what's it even doing here? I mean, the only other shed I can remember that come into planning committee was in March, and that was for a dog grooming parlour. And looking at this one's even better protected than that. It's got a wall round it. You know, this man has his human rights, as Mrs. French very often mentions. I mean, he needs somewhere to keep his classic car. He needs somewhere to keep his lawnmower. Men need sheds. This to me, Gavin, I fully grasp what it's here in terms of policy, but in terms of common sense, this didn't even ought to be here. This should just be approved. This man, he does have his human rights, as Mrs. French mentions regularly. He needs a shed. He's got a purpose for it. I just think it's crazy, and we spent too long on this already.
French is a human rights advisor for the tape. Right. I think Councillor Benny's more or less said it, unless anybody else has got to add up to. I don't think anybody else has got anything to add to this debate, have they? Surely. No. Oh, Councillor French. Now what?
Councillor Benny's taken my value away, so.
Well, human rights. Yeah, you need to be quicker. You need to be quicker to bring that in next time, Councillor French. Right, I'm going to close this debate. I can see where it's going. Officers, would you like to say anything?
If I could just sort of summarise, if I can. So my understanding is, just from Councillor Benny there, that he assesses that it's acceptable in that by virtue of the screening given by the wall, it doesn't actually harm the conservation area or the character of the area. That's generally it. Can I just also mention, in terms of come back to Councillor Gerstner, in terms of roof materials, etc. Obviously, it may be quite limiting in terms of what can be done to make that sympathetic in terms of the area. That's obviously the basis on which officers are coming from this from. If we were to put a condition on securing material details, I would assume that Councillor Gerstner or the Chair would like to see that condition application to ensure they're happy with the materials, that they're sort of sympathetic in the area.
I think I'm quite happy for you to deal with it, but I think probably Councillor Gerstner's given some indication that you'd probably like to see it, wouldn't you?
Yes. Yep.
Oh, I'm quite happy for you to delegate it. So just Councillor Gerstner to see the conditions. And hey, Councillor French.
Oh, Councillor Benny wants to come in as well. I don't know the answer. Has the material for the roof already been bought? If so, that's an unreasonable condition.
Well, we don't know that, do we? Okay, I will just ask that question before, because Councillor French brought it. Has the material been bought for the garage roof?
Yes, it has. I'm happy to share that with whoever needs to see it.
Okay. Councillor Benny?
Yeah, Mr. Chairman, I really do not like putting conditions like this on an application. These can be very, very expensive for an applicant. And again, it's tying people up. Sheds have a very standard sort of roof to them. I looked at the gentleman's house when we were there the other day. His house is in good order. He wouldn't want a pink roof on there any more than I would, or any other colour. It will be sympathetic. You want to make, the house is nice. You want to keep your house nice, and I'm sure this gentleman will keep his shed looking as beautiful as he can do for Wiltshire Conservation Area.
Close it now. That's fine. Do I have a proposal to go with officer recommendation to refuse this planning commission? Quickly. Softly, softly, catch a monkey, Councillor Benny. No, joking apart, we need to get some semblance of normality back here. An officer recommendation, do I have a proposal? Go with officer recommendation to refuse this application. Don't see one. So that obviously fails. I need another proposer. Councillor Benny, what are you proposing?
I'd like to propose that we go against officer's recommendation and approve this application. I can't see whether there's going to be many, if any, conditions on here, but keep them as minimal as you can. And my reasons are that I don't consider it detrimental to the area. And, you know, this man has a right to, you know, to his privacy and to carry on his life as he intends and how he chooses. We should be supporting this man and keeping his classic car, and I believe he said a motorbike as well. Very good use of shed.
Did you want to second this being a local Wiltshire councillor? Councillor Gerstner then. So we've got a recommendation to go against officer recommendation to approve this application. Councillor Bennett's proposed it, Councillor Gerstner seconded it. Can I have a show of hands on that?
It's a unanimous decision, Chairman.
So the application has been approved, and thank you very much. That's a lot quicker than we very much used to, but I close this at 14:45. Thank you very much for attending, everybody. Thanks.